Welcome, everybody, and thanks for coming out. What a pleasure and an honor to have Simmons with us. We spent some time up at the site. Oh, that's him.
In case there's any confusion.
Right here. It's like, ow! Does that work? Anyway, you guys can't see it, but we're on the saguaros somewhere in Mexico, I think, on the virtual people.
It's actually Superstition Mountains.
Oh, Superstition Mountains.
North.
So in 1998, Simmons had vision that you could put together an online environmental journal. And that's back almost in the Stone Age in terms of what one could and couldn't do. And one of the really remarkable things about what he's done is that he's stayed on point with every technological advancement. He has evolved with it and engaged in it, so that Terrain.org has continued as it started as really the first online environmental journal. It is today one of the most influential online journals out there. And I spent some time in it, and everybody has to spend time in Terrain.org, because once you dive in, you'll be there for hours. Poetry, nonfiction, fiction, documentary films, and almost to the point for what we're trying to do with the Zion Canyon Mesa is that when things really started to get weird politically, and we all felt it, that there were problems in our country and in the world, he created a Dear America series. Do you prefer, it's Dear America, but also
Letter to America series, and I'll talk more about that as well.
So this is in the same way that we did podcasts about the Lake Powell pipeline, but coming at it through history. Okay, what did J.W. Powell say about it? What is the Colorado River Compact? We didn't just say yes or no. Simmons has approached these heart-wrenching and compelling and problematic issues through the arts. The writing is beautiful. The issues they've chosen are critical. And this series that he evolved into from being mostly just environmental to addressing the problems of the day. And at the same time, he and I were up at our site talking today. And what we came to the understanding was that you can no longer separate these issues out. You can no longer just talk about environmental issues without talking about racial issues, without talking about economic issues, without talking, everything's tied together. And I love the way that Simmons has stayed on point technologically with Terrain.org, and also philosophically and with the times, and all the while keeping beautiful writing, beautiful poetry. So go to Terrain.org and dive in, and you'll come out a few hours later and you'll just keep going back. Terry Tempest Williams is on there, Wendell Berry, Gary Snyder, Jory Harjo, Dave Quammen, and many, many others. He networks with print media through MIT Press. He produces readings, and he's gotten so many. He's got Top 50 Literary Magazine and Medizin Award, Best Web Selections in 2008, Top 100 Architectural Blogs.
I don't choose them. As long as they choose us, that's really good.
The Planet Zine Top 50 Websites, and the Utne Reader Best of the Alternative Web. It is a real, and when you go to the site, there's no cost to you and there's no advertising. That's another magic trick that he turns. It's such an honor to welcome Simmons to the Zion Canyon Mesa Lecture Series. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Logan. Thanks, everyone. Are you okay if I talk at this level? I don't need the microphone? Okay, because I'm going to be doing a little bit of a dance up here this evening, because we have folks on the webinar, so digital that way. We have real people in the room, which I very much appreciate, and I'm glad that we can do that. Just so you know, I'm fully vaccinated and boosted and all that kind of stuff. And I just took a COVID test last week. It was negative, so there we are. And I'm going to have to toggle back and forth a little bit between what you're seeing here in the PowerPoint, and then I want to pull the website up a couple times as well, and a couple other websites. But first, let's get started here with a little bit about me. So again, I'm Simmons Buntin. You can catch up with me at simmonsbuntin.com, or if you're on Instagram, at PhotoSimmons. I'm the author of a couple books of poetry. I'm also the author of a collection of unsprawl studies, which started with Terrain.org, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a bit. And because it's the season, and I was so happy to see all of the Halloween stuff as we came in. I think folks should know that I am the official Albus Dumbledore from the Harry Potter series of the Tucson, Pima County area. So I can take my show on the road if you need me up here for any of that kind of stuff. All right, enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about terrain.org. So we got our name from the poem Terrain by A.R. Ammons, who you may know spent some time in the American Southwest. And this sort of first start of the poem really resonates with me. And I'll read that so everybody can see it. The soul is a region without definite boundaries. It is not certain a prairie can exhaust it or a range enclose it. And so here I need a little toggle a little bit because I'm going to escape out of this presentation. And I'm going to hopefully go back to our Zoom, and I'm going to, for a second here, if I can see the, oops, I'm not seeing where, oh, the share screen. Oh, maybe I wasn't sharing that so much. Okay, well, all right, let's go to, anyway, I'm going to pull up Terrain, and I'm going to share that so folks can see that as well. So bear with me on this a little bit as we go back into Zoom land here for that. Yes, no? Okay, well, for those folks who are on the webinar and are not seeing terrain.org, I'm just going to walk folks in the room through that. You can join me online live at terrain.org. But basically, terrain.org publishes a rich mix of literary and technical work. As Logan said, we started in 1998 with our first issue, but we actually kind of came together in 1997. I'll talk a little bit about the history here in just a bit, but what we are is currents, which are editorials. We have poetry, nonfiction, fiction, interviews, reviews and recommended reads, our art terrain gallery where we feature one artist and their work, unsprawl community case studies or regional case studies, or sometimes just really interesting takes on an individual block even. We have a podcast. I don't think it's quite as dynamic as the podcast you have. We just started that, I don't know, like a year and a half, 2 years ago. We've only done a couple a year. But I'm just going to scroll down so you can kind of get a flavor of the kind of work that we're publishing on terrain.org. Now, who here has been to terrain.org? Okay, you guys get brownie points, whatever that's worth. For those of you who haven't, I've got some propaganda on the back table if you want to go check that out on your way out. It'll help you get to terrain.org. Again, some of the other items we'll talk about, series and other things. So spend some time in terrain.org. If you lose hours to terrain.org and you're not happy about that, well, I apologize now. But it's still a kind of a fun thing to do. Okay, so let me go back here and we'll continue with our presentation. I'm going to share the screen on Zoom again. If I can get back to the Zoom, there it is. Okay, so let's pull this over here a little bit, and we'll share the screen, make sure folks can see that again. Here we go. Okay, share. So hopefully everybody on the webinar can share that too. We just ran through terrain.org again. Go take a look there. So, oops, okay, well don't press that, I guess. All right. So what I thought I would do this evening, and I'll talk for, if that's okay, for about 40 minutes, then we'll have some time for Q&A, is I want to not use so much my words to explain terrain.org, although I certainly do that. You can tell I'm a bit of a talkative lad. But I want to share some of the content that's in terrain.org. And we just published this essay this week by Laura Pritchett. It's called 10 Seconds, and it's a short little piece. And I'm going to read that for you right now, because I think it really gets to the heart of what terrain.org is about. This is 10 Seconds by Laura Pritchett, nonfiction essay. Yesterday, I witnessed a great hawk and sparrow drama with several plot twists and an unexpected ending. Let me say right here that I'm not certain what kind of hawk it was. Maybe a rough-legged, perhaps an immature red-tailed hawk. I have no idea, because I only moved from general bird appreciation to actually trying bird watching since COVID, which was a humbling move, as all such moves are. It's hard to admit one has been basically lazy. Honing our observational skills really does matter to a life well lived. I believe that. But also, I am a regular human with regular human tendencies. I've been trying to up my game, though, and this has extended to bird appreciation. So what happened was this. I was shoveling snow off my deck, and I happened to glance up at just the right second. But first, the snow. It didn't really need to be shoveled. It could just melt. The next day was forecasted for Colorado sunny and 60. But there I was for no good reason except I am human, and therefore I wanted to get out of the house. to do things like get fresh air and ward off backaches from sitting and blueness from winter. So there I was, annoyed because it was still very cold and windy, not the sort of day you would really enjoy being outside, but simultaneously needing to ward off dangers. That's when I glanced up to see a flock of sparrows congregated together on a patch of brown muddy dirt near a car, and right then a hawk swooped down and picked up a sparrow, flew a few feet, and landed with it in its talons in the snow. And there they sat for a few seconds. I assumed the hawk would eat the sparrow, which felt like a good idea because hawks need to eat too. But the sparrow kept cheeping, all the scattered sparrows kept cheeping, and I stood there waiting to see how this would play out. And then I said, "Dude," because the hawk was sinking into the snow, flapping his wings. At the sound of my voice, he flew off. I had a moment of confusion. Had he already eaten that little thing without me noticing? Then a little head popped out of the snow, such a tiny little head in a big expanse of white. We stared at each other, equally surprised, and then she flew off to a low branch. I tromped through the snow so I could stand underneath her and looked up and said, "You okay up there?" And she took off, so the answer was yes. Then I looked down at the patterns of the hawk's wing beats and the little sparrow feathers scattered among the crystals. That was only 10 seconds of my day, but it was the most alive 10 seconds of my day. 10 seconds in a day is all you really need, I suppose, to not only relieve backaches and heartaches, but also to realize that instead of just knowing the vague difference between a hawk and a sparrow, a very vague distinction to be sure, that you could take another step in the direction of being a better witness. Rough-legged hawks have small feet, the better to perch on the smaller twigs towards the end of branches, which actually, somehow, really matters. So what I want to focus on there is that 10 seconds of the day and the delight and the surprise and the energy that that brings. And that is my hope as the editor-in-chief and founder of Train.org, that Train.org can bring a little bit of that to us. And I'll talk about here in just a moment how we've evolved. But let's do first a short little history of Train.org, if you will. So we started as Terrain, a journal of the built and natural environments. And in fact, we didn't become Train.org for a few years, and it wasn't until after I found out that there was a Terrain magazine at the Ecology Center in Berkeley that we said, well, we better change our name to Train.org. But as Logan mentioned, we started in 1997, and at that time, Al Gore had hardly even invented the internet. And so our first URL was bod.net/terrain, boardofdirectors.net. That was my email provider, actually. That's how we got that website up. We used to build these things by hand. As Logan mentioned, we're the first online literary journal of place. We're also the second oldest online literary journal still publishing, coming up on 25 years, which is something, I think. Our first issue was The Urban Neighborhood, published in the summer of 1998. And we had 32 issues, all theme-based, published before we transitioned to what we are now, which is a journal that publishes 3 to 5 contributions per week that are in a mix. And I really missed that sort of theme idea. It was something about context. And to me, Terrain.org is all about context, how the pieces speak to each other, how the places that they talk about speak to sort of the culture and in a way to each other, and if they don't, why not? And we're advertisement free and free to the public. So that's a little bit about Terrain.org. Now I mentioned these 32 issues, themes. You can go to our older issues tab on the website to see what some of those are. But I wanted to also mention a few of the series that we've had. So I like themes so much that I feel like the series really fill that void for me. And so I'm not going to read all of these, but some of them include such titles as A Life of Science, or A Stone's Throw, which is by Lorette Savoy. Living Lavapai, we had somebody who lived in Spain and wrote from there. Actually, we've had people live in Hong Kong, in Spain, in the Andes, visit Iceland, and really submit series pieces. So a series would be anything from, let's say, 4 to, well, if we talk about the Letter to America series, to 220 submissions, contributions, I should say, that we published in that context so far. One of those series is by somebody who lives just up the road, Rob Carney, who perhaps you know at Utah Valley University. Yeah, and so what I'd like to do is just give an example of Rob's Old Road News Stories is what it's called. It's a really delightful and very eclectic mix of prose and poetry, of political activism and writing advice. I mean, it's this sort of crazy combination of things, and I love it. And so I'm going to read a poem of his titled, you wouldn't know it from the title, from the photo here, but titled, Why We Have Chickens. Short little poem. Not because they're sexy, but they sure do a good job of luring the foxes. Nose first and slender, with a streak of orange attitude, a spark. They show us how to come out of hiding. What are those teeth for? Biting. And that tail? To say, yesterday is coming up behind you. It'll steal away now if you don't act quick. So be quick. Everywhere the air is waiting, and the night can hear its own heartbeat. Time now to bring things together. Feathers flying, new snow on the ground. So these series really, to me, kind of, again, give us that context for terrain.org and speak to kind of a place or a culture or a person or something where you get to know them over time. And if you've read any of Rob's, and I think we've done, gosh, like 50 or 60 of his pieces now in his series. He just had a book come out, Accidental Gardens, is that right? Do you recall that? I believe that's the title of it, that put together some of these pieces. So anyway, really a fun part of what terrain.org is. In almost every instance, it's about place, but let the authors run with that as they want. And a good example is Pam Houston's 20 Words During Lockdown. So if you know the writer Pam Houston, she published a piece every day for 20 days during the lockdown, and that's all we published of hers, and it was beautiful. And she was given an assignment by a friend of hers to come up with a word and pair that with a photograph and write no more than, I don't know, maybe 100 words on that. And so I recommend you check that out. It's pretty timeless. So a little more about terrain.org. We work in the community too. So we're not just an online journal, although that's predominantly what we do. We have live issue launches. We work with writers and students at writers and publishers conferences. In fact, I was just up at Southern Utah University as sort of their editor in residence, and we work with the students there. We're part of the Arts, Environment, and Humanities Network at the University of Arizona because sort of in my daytime paying job, I work at the University of Arizona. We're a member of the Congress for New Urbanism because we still have, even though we talk about the literary context, we still publish a lot of articles and community case studies. And then we started back in February, I think in part because of the pandemic, and we were really missing this community, not able to get together, this online reading series. And in fact, I invite you all, and maybe even I beg you all to join us on Monday, October 25th for Pam Houston and English Brooks, who's a Utah writer, and Ramona Emerson, who's an amazing Dene filmmaker and writer. That'll be a really special event, I think. Okay, so what about our structure? I mean, is it sort of random in how we came together? Yeah, I guess in a way it is, but it's certainly not random now. We're all volunteer. We have a very low budget at terrain.org. We'd like to change that someday, but for now, that's kind of the way it is. We have 18 editors. I'm the editor-in-chief, but we have primary genre editors. We have an education editor. We have a real mix of wonderful people. We have 27 editorial board members. The editorial board members came on from the get-go. I didn't actually bring on editors in terrain.org until about 2009 when I graduated from grad school in creative writing at the University of Arizona. And then I realized I can't do it all. It's kind of crazy to even think I did for, however long I did. We have 4 contributing editors, and then we have an amazing intern. So Terrain Publishing is the parent organization. I'm also the president and director of Terrain Publishing. We incorporated as an Arizona State nonprofit in 2012, but it was only last year, in 2020, that we incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit, and that's worked out really well for us. We have 8 directors on our board of directors, and we receive funding from donations and from contest entry fees. Some sponsorships, for example, our nonfiction editor, Elizabeth Dodd, has a faculty endowment at Kansas State University, and that helps support a little bit of our work as well. So a small budget, but we'd love to, of course, make it bigger someday. Okay, so what is then terrain.org? Are we a literary journal? Yeah, sure. Are we an environmental journal? Yeah, in fact, we were the first journal to publish anything in a non-academic or non-peer-reviewed setting on ocean acidification. Are we architecture and planning journal? Yeah, we've talked about some of these unsprawl case studies, and those still get a ton of traffic on our website. We're all of that and more. What I think of terrain.org, and Nano and I were just talking about this the other day, is a community, because we bring together people who send us this amazing work, and we get that out into the world, and it creates conversations, insights, rankles some people, appeases other people, and that's really, I think, what it's about, how we can take something that really lives in a digital context and move it over to how we act and see and think and breathe and feel and live. But something happened in 2016 which we were all impacted by, and that was the election of President Trump and the inauguration in 2017. But for us, what happened was the submission by Allison Hawthorne Deming, who is a poet and nonfiction writer, and she wrote what she called a letter to America and sent it to us and asked us to publish it. And I'm going to read this in case you can't see that. This is from the end of her letter. Think of the great spirit of inventiveness the earth calls forth after each major disturbance it suffers. Be artful, inventive, and just, my friends, but do not be silent. And many people right after the election really were silent. I mean, several of us were shocked. I think looking back now, we should not have been, but many of us were. And so when she sent me this letter, I said, Allison, this is amazing in and of itself. But it gave me this idea, can we take this piece and reach out to contributors and other people who haven't been contributors and make this something that we publish every day from when we publish yours until either we run out or the internet goes dark or whatever the case may be. And she said, yeah, I really like that idea. So we reached out to all kinds of folks and said, hey, send us something. From probably 50 or 60% of the people we sent it out to, they said, I can't write anything. And so we said, don't write to it, don't write about it, write around it. And so I think if you look at many of the letters to America that we published, you'll see that they're not necessarily head-on editorials about what is happening to America, what's happening to the world, how we're impacted by things. But we did publish that first one a couple weeks after the election, and then every day until well beyond the inauguration, we published a new letter to America, and we continue to publish those today. In fact, we've published 220 of those. And it's not just prose letters in a letter form. It's not just poetry. It could be art. It could be video. We have a really amazing photo series from Sarah Skeen, for example, at a Japanese internment camp up in Colorado. So it's really different pieces there. And so I mentioned the shock, and so silence there. And then we move from creative resistance to a kind of a creative rebuilding with the election of President Biden. But we all know things haven't changed radically since then, frankly. And so there's more work to be done there. And they're really, these letters to America are fundamentally about preserving the ideals of democracy, of a progressive democracy, and of place, and of diversity in culture, in all contexts. Okay, so I'm going to read you a few of these letters to America, or excerpts of letters to America, if that's okay. And this one is one of my favorites. Some of you maybe have heard me read this before. It's by Cuban-American poet Suzanne Frischkorn, and it's just called Dear America. It was published on December 13th, 2016. And you'll see that when we talk about Dear America, what we've transitioned from is not just a place-based journal, but a journal that focuses on social justice, environmental justice, climate justice, and advocacy, which I think is so essential in this day and age. And some people could argue, well, why weren't you that before? We sort of were, but we definitely are now on that track. Again, Dear America by Suzanne Frischkorn. It's time to teach my daughter how to shoot an arrow, how to use a knife, how to hit the center of a target. It's bloody work, but she should know it's time to teach her how to win a debate while applying lipstick without a mirror, and how to hold her keys between her fingers in a parking lot. It's time for her to hit the weight room, join the cross-country team, cast a spell, literally and figuratively. And it's time for her to develop telekinesis and clairvoyance. It's time she knows to never leave her drink unattended, never drink on an empty stomach, never drink before her period. And maybe what I mean to say is never drink alcohol, period. It's time to learn that one day she might switch grocery stores because a guy on staff there gives her the creeps. And even if it's less convenient to travel across town, it's always best to trust her intuition. It's time to teach her that when a grown man stares at her new breasts, she is not the one who should feel ashamed. America, she's her mother's daughter. She's got this. Yeah, pretty powerful stuff. But you may be saying that's not so much place-based. I would argue it really is place-based, but can we really distinguish place from people? I mean, place is really, frankly, human abstract anyway, but can we separate place from culture, from people, environment? No, I don't think we can. But let's get something, read an excerpt of Kurt Caswell's letter to America that came out about a year after the election on November 3rd, 2017. And this gets to really the heart of the matter for many of us, and especially I think those of us who think about the near and the long-term future. Dear America, to live in America in the 21st century is to live inside a bubble flush with oxygen while someone goes around distributing matches. Trump and his tactics of chaos and obfuscation is a distraction. But Trump is not the problem, nor is he the answer. He is a symptom of us, which means you are the problem. I am the problem. We are all the problem. No matter your position, you and I, all of us contributed to the cultural, economic, and political climate in which Trump was elected. And the problem with our great distraction is that it puts us off the real problem, the bigger problem, climate change. There is no solution to the problem of climate change. Democracy in its capitalist economy will not fix it. A dictator in a communist economy will not fix it. A culture war between us and them will not fix it. A race war will not fix it. A gender war between men and women will not fix it. I avoid driving, I recycle, I turn off unused lights in my house, and even if everyone in the world does so too, the Earth's warmer future will still arrive. It is here already. And what is left for us to do is cope, adapt, endure. I lived for a year and taught school on the Navajo Reservation in New Mexico. During that time and after, I read widely about Navajo history and culture. In the Navajo creation story, there is a time when women and men come to such odds that the Creator decides the only solution is to separate them by a river. The men are forced to live on one side, the women are forced to live on the other. Time passes, and the people begin to complain. The women miss what the men offer, and the men miss what the women offer. Each discovers that men and women are complementary. They are not the same, and they are not equal. Women possess attributes that the men do not have. Men possess attributes that the women do not have. The Creator then puts the women and men back together, and they go on living as before. In the warmer future, human beings, all of us, everywhere, are going to face real challenges, challenges that threaten even our species' viability. The extinction of Homo sapiens is not a Hollywood movie scenario. It's within reach during the next century. We have no time to publicly honor all our private wounds. Instead, we must honor our strengths and our differences. Then, one group of people with similar beliefs and values, a kind of tribe, may use their strengths to help another group of people with different beliefs and values. Globalism is not the answer because its underlying mission is to further consolidate wealth and resources, a system in which most of us serve a few of them. The answer, or perhaps our best chance, is some form of cooperative tribalism, which brings all the best of each group together to benefit the whole. And groups would cooperate because we have a common enemy, climate change, which is to say, ourselves. In the warmer future, women and men are going to need each other. Indigenous people and so-called non-Indigenous people are going to need each other. People with darker skin tones and people with lighter skin tones are going to need each other. People whose lives are guided by the Quran and people whose lives are guided by the Bible are going to need each other. The list goes on and on. If we can't all come over onto the same side of the river and walk up the hill to higher ground, carrying our strengths and differences with us, it is the river that will come over onto both sides and wash everything out to sea. Yours, Kurt Caswell. So pretty powerful stuff. But I am not going to leave you in the Letter to America series with such a perhaps true but certainly foreboding letter to America. Instead, I'm going to end with a small excerpt by Rick Bass from Dear America. So this is Dear America. Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy. This is the book we published in cooperation with Trinity University Press back on Earth Day 2020 that came out of this Letter to America series on terrain.org. It features 85 letters that are published online and 50 new letters, including this Rick Bass one that ends. It's 11 sections in the book, and the last section is called Togethering, because we thought it was important to end this collection on letters to America that are that have seeds of hope, that have a positive message, that frankly sort of look us all in the face and say, we are the ones who have to make the difference here. This is Rick Bass's letter. It is called Dinner with America. And I'm just reading a very short excerpt, maybe a third of the letter. If America were a person, and it occurs to me in this fast evolving speciation where we are willingly transferring ourselves from individual voices into corporate proxy voices, that personhood seems ever more remote. Well, I really don't think I'd write a screed about what's wrong. It feels too much like telling a sick person you're afraid they're dying. I think if she were here at the table with me, on this porch at the end of summer and beginning of fall, with the rich green scent of marsh grass flowing up toward me, and no bird song, no frogs, just stillness. Later tonight there will be wolves. I'd fix her a meal. It would be elegant and heartfelt. Potatoes and meat, elk backstrap cooked in an iron skillet with a dash of cream and sautéed morel mushrooms picked from last season's fire and then dried, stringing them on this same porch with thread and needle to twist and dry in the summer sun and breezes before rehydrating. I wouldn't feel the need to preach or complain. Being sentimental, I might even tell her I'm grateful to her for much. Later in the evening, as we got near the bottom of the wine I'd opened, a Côte du Rhône or a Bordeaux, I might read some poetry to her. American poetry, American art created in hard times, leaning hard on those old crutches of beauty, creativity, imagination. We'd save room for dessert, because even though I think there's going to be a tomorrow, one never knows. Huckleberry rhubarb. We might talk about what makes a great American, great ones we've known. Teachers would be thick among them, and older people of integrity we've been lucky to know. My grandfather, my parents. Artists are my heroes too. I talk about Berger and Merwin's poem, Thanks. We'd stay up late. I'd plug in the porch lights. The pie would be pretty great. She'd want to know the recipe for the crust, but I wouldn't give it to her. Not yet. I'd want to keep her coming back. And he goes on. You know, Rick Bass is pretty amazing. So that is, the Letter to America series, which has really spurred, again, this movement from simply place-based writing. In fact, I used to say we're not an environmental journal because we didn't take a position one way or another. That said, we've always published guest editorials and other work that certainly talk to the need for us to, do a better job of our planet, protecting our planet. But we move now much more to social justice, environmental justice, climate justice. We issued a commitment to action, a statement on racial justice after the horrific events of the summer of 2020, the George Floyd killings and others, and make a recognition that we are inseparable from what's happening in this world. And so I'll just read a brief statement here from our statement on racial justice. And it's not just a statement. A statement is nice. Everybody issued a statement. That's important. But there are action items, and we followed through on those action items. We start, as a journal focused on the built and natural environments, we at terrain.org recognize the inseparable threads of racial justice, climate justice, and environmental justice as inherent in the soul of place. That harkens back to the A.R. Ammons poem. In our ongoing work toward becoming an anti-racist journal and organization, we acknowledge the ways that environmental publishing has privileged white voices, and we commit to change. And I think we all recognize that's true, that historically, nature writing, environmental writing has been mostly folks who look an awful lot like me. And that's only part of the story. It's maybe not even the most important part of the story. We also this year established an annual Editors Prize where we recognize marginalized writers, writers of color, LGBTQ+, women, basically, again, people who don't necessarily look like me, and I know that it puts me in a bit of an awkward position sort of saying that, but here I am. And so we have this annual Editors Prize that we give for poetry and fiction and nonfiction too, because as you saw, we have a small budget. And so we can't always, in fact, we rarely do pay contributors for their work. It's something we want to get to, just like I'd like to be able to pay the editors for their work too. We're not there yet, but we felt it was important to establish this prize so that we can at least promote some of the amazing work and reward some of the amazing work that we're getting from largely marginalized writers. And then, of course, this thing happened that we all know about called the pandemic, and that's changed things radically for us as well. And so I want to, the last thing I'm going to read is a really short poem by Naomi Cohn, who's actually a blind writer, who has a fantastic essay in Terrainorg that is worth spending some time with. But this is a really delightful letter to America that we published in April of this year. It's called Into the Fire. Looking out at cold, virus-emptied streets, I'm warmed by that future bonfire. Strangers pressed shoulder to shoulder, laughing and singing, mouths fearlessly agape as we squirt jets of hand sanitizer into the burning oak and ash, sending a green roar of flame into a star-spangled sky. Actually, I should get on that one. There we go. Into the fire we toss it all. Masks, pandemic diaries, jigsaw puzzles, sourdough starter. That last goodbye mumbled over Zoom. And here we are on Zoom. So, oftentimes as editor-in-chief, people will ask me, well, what are you looking for? And it's often easier, I think, for any editor to say, well, here's what we're not looking for. But what I'm really looking for is what we sort of saw in the 10 seconds in this piece too. Surprise, delight, perhaps a little playfulness. Not everything is going to be playful, of course, but we have to take ourselves a little tongue-in-cheek every now and then, don't we? So, okay, so beyond that, though, some collaborations. And I said in this conversation that we would talk a little bit about what others are doing. So let me speed through that so I don't take up too much of your time. But some of the collaborations we have, I mentioned Southern Utah University. We published this neat series, A Life of Science, with the University of Arizona Carson Scholars Program, where PhD students who are just becoming scientists write an essay about what it means to do their work now in a world of radical environmental change. We're working really closely with Spring Creek Project for Ideas, Nature, and the Written Word. In fact, I was telling Logan, this is an organization that that folks here need to know about, because they've got an artist residency and they're really doing some amazing work. We're running a series with them, Long-Term Ecological Reflections, and a new series on wildfire will be running in 2022. Others, well, we'd love to partner with another environmental organization or two or a foundation. And so we'll get there. So what we've created, I think, a beautiful virtual space to gather about place. Not as a substitute to place, but really to almost springboard the preservation of place and other factors. A new or now old vision for place-based multimedia content. We were really one of the first literary journals, not the first, but one of the first to include audio with all of our poetry, multimedia, video, image galleries. We really interact and really try to take advantage of the full multimedia medium we have. We have our Unsprawl case studies. There was a book that came out of that as well. We have teaching resources for Dear America and for teaching Terrain.org in general. And then poet Derek Sheffield, who's our poetry editor, suggested I throw literary field guides in there. We haven't created any literary field guides, but I'm a contributor to the Sonoran Desert Literary Field Guide, which brings together, well, everybody's assigned a species, whether it's an animal or a plant, and you write about that, and then the editors weave together a narrative around that, and includes art. And a couple others I just sort of recommended to people, hey, you should be doing this. Well, an Appalachian one was published recently, too, with Rose McClarney and Laura Gray Street, the editors of that. And Derek Sheffield and C. Marie Furman are working on a beautiful one out of Cascadia, which is where this image is from, some native art there that includes, and that one's not broken by species or even biome, but by sort of the native recognition of what's within this world in this area. Okay, what are our challenges? And this, I don't mean Terrain.org, I mean any sort of digital online publication, and maybe any publication, period. The world lives online, but hey, don't forget to get outside, right? It's important. Digital energy footprint must be considered. All right, here I'm going to pull up a website. Folks won't be able to see this on the webinar, but but other folks. So I guess I closed that. Okay, let me see if I can't get this here. We're going to pull up real quickly a website that's called, actually here, I think I can do it this way, sorry. I'll click this, called websitecarbon.com. Oops, sorry. And, okay, I guess I'm not. All right, let's go back. Well, anyway, okay, I won't pull it up, but websitecarbon.com is a website that Eric McGrain, who's on our editorial board, told me about when I said, hey, I'm going to be talking a little bit about terrain.org. He's like, well, hey, don't forget that online publications have, in some cases, a pretty large digital footprint. And so if you put in any website there, you can see what the digital footprint is. And it's not just the servers that are being used, but it's actually how much traffic there is and what kind of energy people are using who access that website, in sort of the region they're at. And I'm really sort of sad to admit that Terrain's is not that great of a digital carbon footprint, which is like, well, we print our stuff on recycled paper, but what are we doing, So anyway, check that out, websitecarbon.com. It's got some pretty neat stuff. And then media often, of course, yeah?
Is there a way to offset that?
There is, yeah. So it shows you, so what it does is it presents this sort of infographic view. And I'm happy to provide this or provide the link to that too, folks can see it. But it gives you an infographic, and in our case it says you use more energy, or you have a larger carbon footprint than 65% of all other websites out there. And I'm like, what? There's some big websites. But part of that is we've been online for so long, and we have a ton of contributions, and we have a lot of content that we carry, audio files and stuff like that, video files. But so then it tells you, sort of humorously and somewhat painfully, what that is, how many trees that accounts for, whatever. But then at the bottom it says, here's what you can do to offset your carbon footprint as a website. You can switch hosts. Our host actually gets its energy from a sustainable energy source, and which is recognized on this too. And there's some other things you can do. So we need to take ourselves to account here on that as well. And I'm sorry I couldn't pull that up to share it. But okay, so one outcome, so we mentioned let's go back up here. So we mentioned media often presents a skewed view of nature. And so we published this really amazing essay by Paul Lindholt in 2015, which is called The Trumpets of Solitude, which is all about that. And so one of the quotes I think is really great. One outcome of all our TV viewing, and by the way, I'm a big fan of some TV shows, I must admit. Like Ted Lasso, for example, which, by the way, is also about community when you get to the heart of it. Okay, one outcome of all of our TV viewing is the social creation of nature. The intelligent designs of corporations, all bent on consuming us as media products, filter what we think we know about the out of doors. Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, for example, is a great example of that. So we can't take for granted everything that we see online is believable. Well, shoot, if the election cycle has taught us anything, it's that, right? And social media has particularly skewed that. So our challenges then are how can we ensure we remain sustainable in all the contexts, everything from financial to our digital carbon footprint to ensuring that the pieces that we're publishing speak to truth and help people move to action, because that's a part of what we are now, and how can we expand our overall community. I'm not going to give you the answers to those because we're constantly thinking about that, and everything, whether sustainability, it's always a goal versus a sort of a where we're at, right? Okay, so what are our opportunities? As technology evolves, so will we. Interactive features such as videos, maps, augmented reality, virtual reality. I am going to pull up these because these are really pretty special examples here. And so, again, for folks who aren't able to see this on the webinar, if you look at Language Keepers on Emergence and Population Mountains on the Pudding, you'll see some of these places where we should be going and can be going as terrain.org. Yeah, you guys are not seeing that up there either. Okay, hold on. Well, I don't know why you're not seeing that when I am, but let me minimize this. We're going to escape out of this. Maybe. Okay. So, where did that go? Okay. Yeah, we're seeing that. Language Keepers. Okay. So this is the Struggle for Indigenous Language Survival in California. Emergence is a really wonderful magazine that's sponsored by a foundation. And I just want to look at their introduction real quickly to see the kinds of things that we can do online that we're going to be moving to. I'm not going to turn the sound on just from a resource perspective. But one thing I do want to show you here, besides the sort of great narratives, is this sort of interactive map of all these. And these are the language families just in California of the native groups. And as you may well know, languages are disappearing. So let me minimize that and go back now to pull up this other one, which I'm going to have to share this again. So bear with us. I'll click this. We're not seeing that again, so let me escape out of this so that folks can. Hold on. Almost there. Okay. All right, and then we'll go back over here. Okay, so this is a site called The Pudding, and what it does is it demonstrates data in a really interactive, cool way. So population mountains, this is a story about how to perceive the population of cities. Here's New York City, a region of 18 million people. And as we scroll down, it gives us a different way to think about and interact with population. Pretty amazing, huh? And so then you have the opportunity to look worldwide or to compare regions. This is Los Angeles compared to Indonesia with Jakarta. And look at that population. We think of LA and Southern California as pretty populous. But anyway, this is the kind of thing that we can be doing more of, and will be doing more of as technology evolves in terrain.org. So let me go back in here, get this, and let's not forget our Zoom folks. We need to go back and share the screen with them, which I'm going to do. Maybe not. Okay. Hold on, sorry. Okay. Get that going again. And let's go here. There we are. Okay. Let me share the screen again. Sorry for you webinar users. I know this is not the most interactive. And okay. So accessibility is, of course, a critical factor for an online journal. It isn't something that you have to go to the bookstore to buy or go somewhere to read. You can get to it online, and we're accessible because we're free as well there. Reduced demand on our most sensitive or sacred places. So if we have interactive ways to experience places, and of course, between augmented reality and virtual reality, that's going to become more and more the case, then maybe we won't have so many people come through Springdale to see Zion. We probably will, but there might be a way to kind of reduce that. And I think perhaps most importantly, political voice and leverage to preserve or change places or cultures. Then the Letter to America series is really our example of that, because as we publish these pieces, then they're shared on social media. We've had some teachers send those, well, maybe not teachers, but we've had people send those to their legislators to say, this is, you know, we need to be thinking about that. So there's a way to be really overt about that. You can publish something that's really damning in a way, something like Kurt Caswell's Letter to America to really get us thinking about things. We're going to be more subversive, sort of working behind the scenes. Now, we're a 501c3, so we can't lobby or anything like that, but certainly we can publish materials that get people to act on that. And most importantly, I think for an online journal, we can and are immersive. So I will end on this quote by Ramona Emerson, again, who we'll be reading October 25th, and who we just published an interview with in terrain.org, so you can read that. We all know what's happening, but how can we fix it? How can we help in a permanent, forward-thinking way? It's our job to film people. Now, she's a filmmaker, but it, you know, this really applies to all of us and all of our activities that we're doing for the common good. It's our job to film people and to make them fully aware in the eyes of others, to help them to be a part of dialogue that creates change. No one needs pity. No one needs lecturing. They need change. So change is what I hope we're about. So thank you. That's it. Went a little bit long. Sorry about that. I'm going to stop sharing this real quickly, and I'm going to I think I've stopped sharing screens. Let me see if there's anything else on the chat. Not seeing there. I'm happy to take any questions from folks here, or if you can still see me and are still with me on the chat, happy to take questions there as well. So What, if anything, can I answer for you, Anna? Yeah.
Going on 25 years of this publication, do you have any advice on how to stay energized with a project that is volunteer?
Wow, vacations help every now and then. Yeah, when we switched from our quarterly theme-based sort of publication schedule, I thought, okay, well, I'll move to regular so we can have more traffic, but it'll be less condensed work for me as the production manager and editor-in-chief. That's not the case. It's becoming way more like homework because we're publishing this stuff all the time. But to be honest with you, the answer to that is sort of what we're all about. It's community. I get so driven by the energy of interacting with folks like you and our editors and our contributors and the work that we're putting out there. It really feels like, and I hope we are, making a difference in the world. That's kind of what I'm about, and so I continue to be energized about that. I mean, I have a daytime job. I love it. I work for the University of Arizona College of Architecture. I'm their marketing and communications director. But this is really the work that drives me. And getting amazing work from poets and writers and artists and musicians even, and out there in the world. That's kind of what does it. It would be nice to be able to partner, with a foundation or something that could kind of help offset some of those things, but I don't know. It does take somebody who's passionate about it, and I feel like I'm pretty passionate about that. And our editors are too, and our editors own their sections, or I want them to own their sections. And there's no way Terrainorg will be anything near what it is without their great work, and they're also volunteers. Yeah.
So the most important question, what's your Sonoran desert species?
Which one did I have? I didn't get to choose. I had the desert cottontail. So I wrote about the desert cotton. I mean, we all want something, diamondback, rattlesnake, or a coyote, which I love, or saguaro, of course, right? There are seminal species there. But, the cottontails are really what feed all of the predators in the Sonoran Desert. So I felt like.
So a more serious question.
Yeah.
And maybe it's two questions that are interrelated. You talk about being a journal of place and the importance of place, and yet you also talk about place being a much more, say, expansive term than what we might generally think about. So I'm really interested, and then, connected to your, city planning, architecture work, which is clearly like very place-based. So I'm curious in your evolution of the thinking of that term and how it fits today, and then related to that, so much of your presentation tonight, you led with poetry. And I'm wondering how you think about poetry's place in this struggle.
Sure. Okay, so let me see if I got these questions right. So speak a little bit to the evolution of place as I see it, and what poetry's role in place is. Wow, we could write, and I think there have been textbooks written on both those. I will say that I have a graduate degree in urban and regional planning, and that experience completely changed the way I think about place. Not just because I was educated more on place, reading Kevin Lynch or J.B. Jackson or something like that, but because I spent more time in the downtown area and learned to fall in love with urban places that are designed well. Something I never thought. As a kid, I grew up largely in suburban settings, and wasn't necessarily a fan of those, but for me it was like, well, getting out into the forest when I was in Central Florida, or the natural springs there, or when I lived in Tucson as a kid, where I live now, getting out into the desert, So that helped me think critically about the places we design and build. And really what it made me realize is, much like sort of pursuing sustainability, place or environment, let me say, is a spectrum. There is we chose the subtitle, A Journal of the Built and Natural Environment, because we wanted to pique people's interest and sort of in calling those two out. But in a way, there is no difference between the built and natural environment. There are no landscapes really that haven't been touched in some context by humans, whether it's noise pollution or something else. And the built environment, we may not love them, any or all of them, but they're made ultimately of natural materials. This sort of goes back to, we're all stardust in some in some context. So I would say my understanding of place is that you can't preserve one without understanding and working to preserve the other. And also, we can't think of place without the culture. And I don't necessarily even mean, although I certainly do mean the sort of ancestries of those places. But it's all interrelated, right? And so I think of place a lot more. When I think of a place, I think now of both its human and its natural history, and you know, and then try to think when we can about where it's going and you know what may or may not make most sense. And we often don't have a say in that, but how we might be able to have a say in that. So for poetry, gosh, poetry has always been, as a writer of poetry, kind of my first love. But in part, I chose so much poetry here because it's just shorter and more succinct and can kind of share that. But that's the beauty of it, right? I mean, maybe it serves my short span of attention too. But poetry is a great way. It's so concise to you know, kind of get that emotive language out quickly and beautifully. And so I don't know, but I love nonfiction too. That was what my master's degree in creative writing is in, nonfiction. I love good fiction. It scares me because I can't even imagine starting to write fiction because it's just to be able to write good fiction is a real art. Well, it's all real art, of course. So does that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think poetry is like a different language. Right?
Yeah.
It is a different experience, and by sharing poetry, it causes us in many ways to open up more
Mm-hmm.
to a wider experience with the content that then is offered afterwards.
Right.
Like you were saying.
Right.
But it's like this, it potentially shuts down some of our more restrictive thinking and
Mm-hmm.
allows us to be more open to more listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And much like sort of the definition of place might be changing, the definition of poetry itself is changing, and we can really take advantage of those hybrid forms and others. I mean, shoot, we should turn this over to Natalie and Nan and have them talk, since they edit Sugar House Press, which, you know, I mean, one of the premier poetry journals in the country today, really. I mean, publishing great stuff, but poetry is changing too, right? I mean, it's much more prose poetry today, I think, than there ever was before, and other multimedia contexts with poetry. There was this online journal for a long time, they don't publish anymore, that was amazing, I thought, called Born Magazine. Did you guys ever see that? Yeah, and they made basically poetry videos and little poetry plays, and it was amazing. So yeah. Okay, there's a question here that I'll answer from Chelsea on the chat. What projects are you looking to make immersive, and how do you see these creating opportunities to take action? I think the answer to that question is yes. And by that I mean, you tell us. I didn't know with Allison's letter that was going to fundamentally change our perspective and our scope, but it did. But I will tell you some things that I'm personally interested in. I think maps, you know, what we can do with maps are sort of amazing. GIS technology.
What did you just say that you didn't realize how something was going to change your perspective?
Yeah, Allison Hawthorne Deming's first letter to America. I didn't know that would change our trajectory, both as a publication and as an organization, frankly. Yeah, so we don't know, you know, often when that happens what it is. I admit, you know, we're publishing less of the unsprawl case studies, and the urban planner in me still really misses those too, so I would like to do more of those. But we're doing some interesting takes on those. We published one, our most recent one was somebody who is a citizen arborist for New York City, and it's he's a photographer too, so it's his take on preserving trees of note, or frankly any trees in New York City in the boroughs, and kind of talking us through how that's chosen. Well, that's not a typical, you know, mixed-use community case study, but it's certainly a cool project and warrants further work, and maybe something that others can learn from, which is one of our goals with Terrain.org as well, especially for, let's say, less literary context.
I just wanted to encourage everyone here to spend time with the series, Letters to America on Terrain.
Yeah.
And you said something really wonderful the past couple days at SU's Ecological Writing Conference, and that is that to engage with the text, a good one, And a text can be, you know, poetry, fiction, nonfiction, like we're talking about. But it can also be a sculpture, a film, anything. There is sort of an inherent act of empathy and a lesson in empathy to really be vulnerable and immerse yourself with the text in someone else's perspective.
Right.
And that's something that I think Terrain.org has done an incredible job of prioritizing with that sense of community that you defined really well.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, you said it better than I could. Thank you, Neil. What else? We've gone a little bit over the hour, so I don't want to keep you, but I'm happy to talk a little longer too if there are any other questions. No? Well, again, thank you to Zion Canyon Mesa so much for having me out here. Thanks everybody for coming out. It's so great to see some of my old friends who I haven't seen in a while come out. It's so great to see many of you who I hope will become our friends in the future. I've got my cards up there on the table too, so if you want to continue the conversation, I'm more than happy to do that.
I just have to say, I'm going to say goodbye on behalf of Zion Canyon Mesa, but thank you for 10 seconds. I shared that today with my husband from your website, and
isn't that wonderful?
as a bird watcher, it just it hit home. I loved it very much.
Well, we need those moments. We need that joy.
We
and
do.
Yeah.
It was so perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So should we end this real quickly too?
So I would just like to thank our sponsors tonight. Not only our wonderful presenter and Southern Utah University for sharing Simmons Buntin with us, but also for the town of Springdale, the Canyon Community Center, Spring Hill Suites, Bit and Spur Saloon, and all of our other very generous contributors for all of the work, the support they've given to Zion Canyon Mesa. We hope to continue this series, so look for us. We'll let you know when we have more things coming up. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going. Thanks all.